So one of these days, I'll figure out a better workflow for this.
We're live.
Yeah. I know, it's just that I gotta go through this whole herky jerky to.
So, hello everybody out there.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Keep going, man. You got it.
So, Pete, what consoles do you
own? Let's see. I've got Super Nintendo, Xbox 360, and Xbox One here at home. At my parents' house, they still got the Nintendo 64 and the original Xbox.
Nice.
How about you?
I just have a PC and a Super Nintendo. So it's nice to see that there's another Super Nintendo fan down here.
Best console ever.
Right? Did you happen to check out my article I wrote?
When did you write it? Huh?
It's, I think, a week old now. Agus Sickleys edited it, and then Nicole edited it. So it's a masterpiece now.
I probably read it. I'm not running on much sleep right now.
Okay, no worries. But I was just, my thing right now is I've been really interested in kind of this renaissance rebirth going on for the Super Nintendo. And it's like, I'm always kind of on the edge. Like when I go online, like last night I was online and there's this unreleased game that has surfaced now that you can play as a ROM, and it's called, I don't know if you heard about this. It's called Shadowhawk, and it was supposed to be this like 90s comic book hero character that made it into a platformer game, and he's kind of got like a dark, edgy, he's kind of a dark, edgy superhero, and so it's interesting, like, that there's still like people that are trying to like bring all of these unreleased Super Nintendo games to light. And then the biggest news that I heard was there's this company that's in, I believe they're in Arizona, that has made 2 new Super Nintendo games. You know, and this hasn't been done since the 90s. So I'm like, dang, that's pretty impressive. And they started it with a Kickstarter, and it got successful and funded. The only thing that bugs me right now is that they have sent out the game to the people that back them, but they have not made any of the game for people for the general public yet. So people are wondering, like, why haven't you released the game to non-backers yet?
Right. And that's so always kind of my concern with Kickstarters when you're funding a product. Are you funding the product for mass release, or is it just like a specialty store? You know, where you sign up to buy something.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to challenge the notion that the Super Nintendo is the greatest game system ever made.
Oh shit!
He was listening.
Just as a question, and welcome aboard everybody to GWW Weekly, our new radio talk show covering pretty much all things geek. So each week, some mixture of Jonathan Reyes, Peter Morrow, Dave Pecci, and myself will be gathering to just kind of have a campfire kind of chat about everything in geek that's gone on. We'll be talking about the stuff we've been doing in geek content. News that has dropped, and kind of some big, deep philosophical discussions. And unfortunately, just so everybody understands the programming, while we are discussing Luke Cage, which is going to cover, I think, 6 or 7 episodes. I think we still have to work that out. That's sucking up some of our time that we would normally dedicate to this show's recording because we're trying to pack it all into one night. But eventually this show will be probably an hour long of discussion of just 4 buddies who are into lots of geek stuff. So I'm going to keep it generational. Let's not even talk about maybe we'll talk about whether or not it's actually the greatest console ever made. But just within that generation, which was generation, man, was it? What did you say? What did you flash, Peter?
2. It was the second, at least
Yeah.
for the U.S. market.
Well, I mean, across console generations. I think it was generation 3 at least.
Oh, so yeah, with the Ataris and
Maybe 4. So if the Pong machines were 1, the Atari 2600 was 2, the Atari 2600 and like ColecoVisions were 3. I want to say.
Then you have NES and then Super NES.
Yeah, so it may have been 5. I am going to fact check that while we're talking. Usually I have, that's a particular historical piece that I usually have memorized, but I've since lost track of it. But
so here's one thing that a lot of people say in defense of the Super Nintendo is that it perfected what the NES did. Nintendo was able, they're credited for making at that time the best 2D action games, because they had time with the NES to get it right. And that's kind of why people say the 64 wasn't good, because it was what people call the experimental age of console gaming. And so the 64 wasn't as good. So then when the GameCube came out, kind of 3D gaming was a bit more perfected. So
right, well, I guess that's kind of a bit of my contention. And it was generation 4, so I think I was right. I think I said it was at least 3, but I had a feeling it was 4. So, so the Master System, the Sega Master System, and the NES being generation 3, and the Genesis and Super NES being 4. So, I guess that's kind of my problem with that discussion of generation 4, right? Yes, I know that the Super NES did some great things with regards to platformers, but if you stretch beyond that and you talk about RPGs, you talk about almost, we talk about Metroidvania games these days, right? I almost feel like Vector Man on the Sega Genesis was almost heading in the direction of Metroidvania kind of games. I just feel like, and I will definitely say generationally, through generation 4, 5, maybe 6. I think 6 is where generation 6 was when I hit an age. Yes, generation 6, maybe 5. 5 or 6 is definitely where I hit an age and experience level where I could truly say I was agnostic to brands. Like I just like playing like whatever the best games were, but definitely across generations 3 and 4, I was definitely a Sega fanboy. So maybe I'm taking a Sega fanboy defensive stance here. I just felt like the Genesis like covered more bases. And on top of that, you have and then if you throw in the business element, right, you have this whole thing of where, I mean, the Super NES is where Nintendo essentially destroyed all of its third-party loyalty, right? I mean, that was when they got into the business practices of you could only release like a maximum number of games per, like a time block. So you had Konami like stand up like shell companies to like just so they could release more games. You had a lot of kind of anti-partner practices, and I mean things that went on in Generation 4 with the Super NES is why you don't have strong third-party support for Nintendo platforms today.
Yes.
Yeah, but true. I really like that controller over the Genesis. I mean, that is to me that's the perfect game controller right there.
On the Genesis?
No, on the Super.
Okay. Okay.
It's so simple and
4 buttons,
small.
2 triggers, a D-pad, start and select. What more do you need?
I will definitely say the Generation 4 to me was the height of the console war.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think that's the generation where you had two consoles that were the nearest in parity. I feel like since then there's been like significant divergences in like the capability or the business model of like the different consoles that, arguably one console should have been a definitive number one and the other should have been a definitive number two.
Well, I'll agree with you on that height of the console wars, because I knew people who had Sega. I knew people who had the Super. I knew virtually nobody who had both. You were either a Sega or a Nintendo.
I guess
Rather
my
had
family, my family was one of the odd ones out because we had both.
Yeah, you either had the Game Gear or the Game Boy. There wasn't a whole lot of, cross-platform. But now I think most people at least have
some mixture of two.
Some mixture of the two or three major players,
Right.
in addition to a PC. At least that's how it feels like on the staff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Wikipedia looking at the numbers, and I don't know how accurate these are, but Generation 3, it was a walk away, right? And I think that's because the Master System was just marketed more heavily and sold more heavily in Japan. But you had the NES sold about 62 million units compared to the Master System's 13 million, so that was a slaughter. But in Gen 4, I mean, it was a knockdown drag out fight with the Genesis selling 40 million and the Super NES selling 49 million.
Oh, jeez.
What
was the N64 out of curiosity compared to?
So the N64 was Generation 5. So you had the Atari Jaguar sell 250,000 units. That's such a shame. And I actually had a Jaguar, and I really liked that system, but it was hard to find games for it.
It was a great idea.
Yeah, exactly. So you had the PlayStation in Generation 5, the original PlayStation, sell 102 million units, which is amazing. You had which again, there are statements today that get made by the gaming media that I just don't understand. Like, they refer to they refer to things like, oh, this has been the best selling console, in all history. I'm like, the original PlayStation sold 102 million units. We haven't sold 102 million of gaming consoles in Generation 8 combined, right, across all the manufacturers. So, but of course, there were a lot of post-generation sales in that too. So maybe, but PlayStation was 102. Nintendo 64 was just under 33 million. The Sega Saturn sold roughly about 10 million.
Wait. So what was the N64 again? You said 39?
30, just under 33 million.
Okay, so it didn't even top the SNES then.
Right.
And the Sega Saturn was what?
The Sega Saturn was just under 10 million. Of course, it was short-lived, right? Because it didn't sell for the full generation. But look at, I mean, the Nintendo 64 sold 33 million, right? And the Super NES sold 49. So it wasn't. I mean, it was a good bit off, but it was closing in on Genesis numbers, which sold 40 million, right? Again, if these numbers are to be believed. Now, PlayStation 2. So if we go ahead to Generation 6, you had PlayStation 2 with 155 million. Xbox with only 24 million, GameCube with just under 22 million. So you had the rookie on the block, the Xbox, outsell the GameCube, and that's
wow.
And that's why the Cube is such a travesty. So the Dreamcast sold 9 million units. So it actually sold less than even the Sega Saturn. Again, with the plug pulled on it. Xbox 360s at 85 million. Again, these are definitely including sales after these consoles were the premier console for their manufacturer on the market. So a lot of these are the consoles parents went and bought when little Timmy was like, oh, I want the new one. And they're like, nope, but you can get the last generation, right? So Xbox 360 was at 85 million. PlayStation 3 was at 86. And the Wii, the great anomaly, was at 102.
I don't think it was a big anomaly, personally, with the Wii.
Wait. So what was the Wii compared to the others? You said 102. And
Wii was 102. PS3 was 86, and Xbox 360 was 85.
That surprises me because I was not impressed with the Wii compared to GameCube.
Well, I know Peter's gonna beg to differ. So let me go ahead and squeeze in my anti-Wii statement also. And I bought the Wii and I owned it. And I think there are a lot of gamers who followed a similar pattern. I bought it. it was cool, and then it sat in my living room with its little blue light on in the middle of the night for months, and then finally I was like, I need to sell this thing so I never play it. And I think lots of people who were gaming is not or was not a huge percentage of their free time bought the Wii as like a party box. But I don't, and I think they continued to play like the 3 games that they own for it. But as far as being like a system that you play on continuously and you kind of groom your game collection for it, dare I use the term core gamer, which now since Cliff Bleszinski uses that term, I've decided, yeah, that means it's okay. Like I think the Wii burned hot, but I don't think it was really representative of what went on in that generation from a gaming culture perspective and a long-term gameplay perspective. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, so all of those reasons that you guys just listed are exactly why it succeeded. That's how it was marketed. It wasn't marketed to the gamer. It was because, let's face it, gamers like us are pretty set in our ways when it comes to what games we play, what consoles we buy. Even our opinion of the experience goes. So what Nintendo did was they marketed the Wii as a party console. This is what you normal people can do to have fun with video games, which, I mean, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, I remember these, and even PC, these are kind of gated communities. What's the biggest selling video games? Even right now, it's first-person shooters. Sure, they're team-based, but where do you play them? You play them alone. In general, you don't have 4 friends anymore over with the split screen, which I kind of miss. I like that about GoldenEye, and now I'm getting nostalgic. But, the Wii did a great job marketing itself as that party console. And then they added in some stuff when they put the... Oh, they didn't put the Wi-Fi in the Wii, did they? Can't remember.
Yeah, it was definitely no. Yes,
So
because it had no stinking hardwire or Ethernet port.
That's right. So, yeah. So they put the Wi-Fi in, and you could start downloading some of the nostalgia games, which, I mean, there you go.
Yeah, I guess.
So I wouldn't call it an anomaly. It's just not a hardcore gaming console, and it sold so well because it was the fun console. It was the status symbol. It's like the iWatch, or iPhone rather, when it first came out. Nobody needed that kind of smartphone, but they bought it just so they could say, hey, look at this shiny new thing.
Right. I guess when I call it an anomaly, I mean that if you only look at the metrics, I don't think the metrics are representative of what really went on, right? Because you go 102 million consoles sold, but I feel pretty confident that if then I talk about numbers of hours played on the console, I think the 360 and PlayStation 3 definitely exceeded that. If I talk about like average size of game library for each of those systems, like I said, I think you talk to 360 owners, right? and they're doing this on their Xbox Ones, right? They go back and they look at their Xbox 360 library, and it's like plus 20 games, right? Easily.
Yeah.
To say nothing of like their Xbox Live Arcade collection. But with Wii, like people typically owned like 5 games.
Yeah, completely.
So, and they were just things that they played over and over and over again. They weren't like campaigns. They weren't like
they're like party games.
Yeah, right. And the other reason I call it an anomaly is because I don't know how repeatable it is. Because if we look at the Wii U,
it clearly is not repeatable.
Right. And I think these numbers are a little behind because they only show the Xbox One at 10 million units. I think Xbox One is up. I thought Xbox One was up at 20 million by now.
Yeah. No, the Xbox One's definitely doing better than the Wikipedia article.
Right.
I think it's...
Go on.
I think it's also worth mentioning, though, that a lot of people bought the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 2 to use as, DVD and Blu-ray players. I had several friends in was it high school or college? College, who said, "No, I'll just buy a PlayStation 2, and that way I'll have a DVD player."
I agree. That was the principal reason I bought the PS2. By the time I bought a PS2, the economics of DVD players had caught up, so it's not like the PS2 was the cheapest DVD player on the market.
Right.
But the PS3 was damn sure the cheapest Blu-ray player on the market for long time.
Yeah, the first Blu-ray player was, damn near 10,000.
It was expensive, yeah.
Yeah,
it was up there.
Or unless it was like a VCR.
Right.
I think we're going to see something similar to that with the next Xbox release, with them talking about putting the high definition Blu-ray in.
Yeah, except they do have that in the S now as well. So if you have
that where it is?
Yeah,
okay.
if you have an Xbox S and a 4K TV, you can play ultra high definition Blu-rays on it.
Not that I think a lot of people will invest in high definition Blu-rays, but
right.
It's there for the people who want it, but the difference being those brand new start only at around 400 anyway.
Right, and some of them are cheaper now on sales. I think actually the 1 terabyte unit is $299.
Oh no, I'm sorry, the HD Blu-ray players.
Okay, I got
standalone HD Blu-ray.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. And then as far as like the greatest console generation itself, I've been going back and forth and struggling with that a bit. For me, and I'm not saying it is for anyone, I can definitely see Generation 4 being a strong contender for that title. But for me, it was Generation 7. So the 360 and the PS3 in combination, that was the second or third generation that I was, a multi-console gamer. But predominantly for me, it rests on the strength of the 360 and its online capability. Having been a PC gamer for a long time and having access to an online community, even still, like as a PC gamer, right, playing multiplayer games was work, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I complain a lot about it now because all these publishers are making us sign up for like their own individual accounts, but if you think back to like PC gaming, right, before like the Xbox and the Xbox 360, maybe I shouldn't complain that much because back in those days, you needed to have like an M-Player account, a GameSpy account, an MSN Gaming. Like you had all these different services.
It was ridiculous.
Right, because it was before Steam, right? So you had all these different services you needed to, because games typically didn't come packaged with their own server backend, right? Your Unreal tournaments, right? You just pop the game open and you could go looking for servers. But most games, you open the game, then you had to like alt tab out, like launch a different services app. Sometimes you could open it in game, but you had to bridge the two, and then get those servers to show up like in game, or sometimes you had to be alt tabbed over to the other app's interface to enter it was probably jankier than I allow myself to remember. But so to me, Xbox 360 and in conjunction with the Xbox Live maturation at that point just brought accessible plug and play, easy entry, low friction availability of online multiplayer to the masses. And from the point of its launch until the arrival of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, which I claim is the great biblical scourge of online multiplayer gaming, things were really cool, right? You could log in, you could find cool people to play with on a Friday, like just hours and hours on a Friday night, just popping into Project Gotham Racing 3 with like no filters, no like trying to block people out or anything. 90% of the time I found I would just stumble upon 7 great individuals to go racing with, until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And so for the most part, I feel like console 7 has been like the greatest console generation that I've experienced. I don't know.
Yeah, I still like the Super.
Yeah, no doubt. So what else have you guys been into this week?
So I was gonna say one reason. So I don't know what you thought overall of my article, Exeles, but what do you think about the notion of people going back and making, like, I mean, the term would be homebrew games, but creating a from scratch, like a new game for the Sega Genesis and a new game for the Super Nintendo, and the Dreamcast too has been seeing a bit of that too. I thought it's just creative, and it's testing the limits of, an audience, because for me, like, as soon as they opened up a retro game store in our local mall, I was like, this is just so cool. Like, I want to go start playing my Super Nintendo again. Like, there's actually people out there that are having conventions and, like, talk about it. I mean, it makes me, like, wish we could go back in time, because there's a lot of gamers out there that are just using it to avoid socialness. But I think gaming was intended to bring people together. It was another way to enhance your social life. And that's kind of what I miss about, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get back into. The social gaming is where you went to the arcade. I mean, I still go to the arcade sometimes with my friends. And the Super Nintendo, it's a co-op game that I could play with my siblings again.
Yeah, I mean, it's not for me, but I think it's great. So I guess probably the best thing about it from my perspective is, I've been one person who's just never agreed with, Colin Moriarty's thought that, like, games, like, that this is the least expensive games have ever been in the history of the United States, at least. And I won't even argue it from just a purely mathematical or financial perspective. It's just, a $700 console in 2013 or whatever, or 2006, right, when the PlayStation 3 launched. I don't think that price of entry was reasonable, right, for the average income family in America. So you have the cost of the consoles these days, and Generation 8 something different. Prices have come down. It's different, but my point is that you have the cost of the console, the cost of the games, and the cost of the service. At least that's just on the console, right? Then you have your cable bill, your ISP bill. It's so you've got infrastructure that you have to maintain as well. So these kind of I don't know what I want to call them. I think Peter might be, Peter will know what I'm talking about when you talk about like the indie, like the way the indie music scene used to be when we had brick and mortar record stores, or just like the used record market used to be. Anything, and I'm an adult and I go through now.
Which records are coming back in too? I don't know if you know that. They
never left.
So my point of what I'm trying to come around to is, I'm an adult and I talk to friends and sometimes get demoralized, right? When I hear friends who say, I really like to get like new game X, but I just can't find that extra $60 this month, right? So the notion of any of these homebrew movements that come along and provide a more accessible and a lower financial barrier to people accessing games, I think is awesome, right? And the more that continues and permits access to games of higher fidelity, that have at least an equal fun in gameplay, if they don't necessarily match like the graphical and audio content available in like the most modern AAA games, I think that's awesome.
Although the new SNES games that came out were the price of if a SNES game came out back in the 90s. It's like $50 without the box and like $10 with the box. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and to me, it's like I'm all like, I'm gonna pay that price because I really want to play them, and I think they've gotten good reviews. But I just still can't believe you're charging $60 for a SNES game.
Right.
There's a reason I used to get most of my games from the Blockbuster yearly sales.
'Cause they were
Blockbuster
sales.
Video. Used. Cartridges don't scratch like CDs. So I'm just okay with that too.
Yeah, exactly. So, anything else you guys have been into this week, geek-wise?
The only other thing I've been watching besides, so I finished up. Let's see. So I finished up. What was it? There was some other. Oh, I finished up Voltron, on Netflix. I don't think I'm gonna watch it again. I thought it was interesting because DreamWorks actually, I think, co-produced it. You know, DreamWorks. I think they do like some of the. I think that's Shrek and all of them.
Yeah, it's Ron Howard, Stephen King, and Ron Howard, Steven Spielberg, and I forget the one other guy. Yeah.
But I love the '80s animes and the earlier animes like Robotech and some of the '90s ones. So I thought that they did a lot of it right, but I still thought that it was a bit too modern for my taste. And then I started watching another anime called Wakfu, and that one's interesting because it's a French-made anime, and it has a different taste to it than you know, a different taste than you see from an American-made anime or a Japan-made anime. So I kind of like that. I love like that little different taste to it. You know, like I don't know about many European-made animes, but I like it, the feel.
Now, the closest thing that I ever saw to anime released on a U.S. network. Have you ever seen Mighty Orbots?
No.
Yeah, that might be worth checking out. Just some YouTube clips or something of. I don't know how close I'm not an anime consumer, so I don't know how close the Mighty Orbots cut to like those pieces in terms of like scripting and whatnot. But from a visual style perspective, I've always felt like they were pretty close to anime. Thing to it.
And then the other thing on that topic is I still, for whatever reason, kind of like Japanese anime style video games. For instance, like Mighty Number 9. A lot of people hated that, but I still loved it. And I'm trying to think of what other ones that I've liked lately that are kind of in that style. I mean, Sonic, of course, is like an anime, or not anime, but Japanese created. And then you have the Tokyo Game Show, and you know they've come out with like Yokoi Watch, and which I played it, and I just can't get into that one. But there's still, I think, a lot of the Japanese games I still really like.
And Peter, what about you, man? What else you've been into?
So I some of you might know I'm insane and do obstacle course races. And I recently stumbled on a documentary called let me just double check.
Wait, what is an obstacle race?
An obstacle course race?
Yeah,
So,
is that
you take your 5K or your 10K race, and then you put in several different obstacles along the way, and you got to complete those obstacles to finish the race.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah. Oh, so the documentary is called Rise of the Sufferfests, and it kind of goes into the creation and rise of obstacle course racing and the documentarian's own personal journey over the course of a few years in getting into it, and then having that new hobby kind of change his life and shape how he then becomes a better father and a better husband. So it's actually kind of an interesting documentary with a lot of different people in the words are escaping me again. Different people in the oh hell, just different people that are involved in obstacle course racing. We don't edit anything. Yeah, I found that on Amazon. I bought it and watched it. I'm gonna probably watch it another time because it really gets in depth, and I really enjoyed it. That's actually where I was this weekend. Is one of the obstacle course racing companies just had their world championships in Squaw Valley up in Lake Tahoe. And I was up there helping work the course while one of my friends was running his 13-miler, or no, 15-mile race.
Okay.
He did finish too, so that's good.
So I've been into a few different things, but because we're running really tight on time or over on time tonight, the only thing I will share is like I said, I just recently built this I will say pretty burly gaming rig, which I'm actually broadcasting from tonight.
Did you get read out?
I did get read out. Yeah. I've had it for a couple weeks now.
Okay.
And I had played a few rounds before, and then I took a pause while I built this PC. But this PC runs 2 NVIDIA GTX 1070s in SLI, and I've got both half bridge connectors connected. So I guess what I will say is, based on my testing so far, so I've got the maximum bandwidth throughput across the 2 cards being put to use, and so I've played a bunch of Red Out this week, and had foolishly convinced myself that that through the Class 1 races I was like, this isn't that bad. It's pretty comfortable. When I got the graphical bump, it's actually good because things become sharper and clearer in a game like this that is moving. I know it doesn't appear to be moving fast now because you're basically watching a slideshow of my YouTube video.
It's more like Wipeout, I hear, right, than F-Zero?
Yes, much more like what. Yeah, and I really don't get the references to F-Zero and sometimes Fatal Inertia, while concurrently remaining silent on how similar it is to Wipeout. It's much more similar to Wipeout to me than anything else. And I was not a huge Wipeout fan. I played Wipeout on the PlayStation Portable mostly. And it was just kind of a thing to pass the time, right? A good game to play, like if I didn't have an hour of time to squirrel away just for gaming. But if I had like an extra 10 or 15 minutes in the morning or something before I needed to leave for work, maybe I would play Wipeout. So, but I thought I had this game figured out and nailed while I've been in Class 1. Stepping up to Class 2 is a significantly different experience. So I've been playing a chunk of Red Out, and then have also been going back and playing some Half-Life 2, which holds up really well despite its age. I can't remember exactly how old it is. I want to say like 12 years. And Valve has kept up with graphical enhancements to it, so if you turn everything up again, you get a benefit from being on newer cards. And surprisingly, there's Peter with his
2005.
Okay, all right, gotcha. And surprisingly, despite moving and building a new PC, I've actually published more to YouTube this month than I think I have at all since I started streaming and doing video capture. So I've posted, I think, like 15 new videos this month. So if you're looking for some obscure game, there's a chance it might be in my archive, because I've been just trying to nail the tech associated with streaming. and definitely went on a solid racing binge at the end of last year and this year. There's a lot of racing games and not too many. There's some things out on either side of that, but but there's mobile games in there and other stuff. So if you're looking for a live gameplay example of something, there's a chance it might be on my channel. But yeah, despite all those hindrances, for some reason I got more streaming done this month than I have as my statistical norm. So anything else you guys wanted to cover before we get out of here?
I guess real quickly, like one comic that I want to like highlight is the Mickey Mouse one. Let's see if I can get that in there.
Nice. So
there's Mickey, and that's kind of the art style that they have. And what it is, basically, like it's one of those comics where you can pick up any issue and you wouldn't fall behind, because what they are, it's kind of like if you were watching an old cartoon. They're all a bunch of skits.
Okay, cool. They're all pixelated then.
Yeah. So this very first issue, it had like Pluto, Mickey, Minnie, Donald, and Goofy, but they're not like, there's different skits. So there's like a skit with just Mickey, and then there's a skit with Mickey, Donald, and Goofy. But they're just funny, and they make you feel like a child again. And the art style, I think, it's pretty a little bit modern, so that's pretty cool. And then other than that, I read the newest Invader Zim, which was pretty good. And then the Batman Beyond Rebirth, and that was it. But out of all of them, I wasn't too fascinated with the Invader Zim one, but I really did like the Mickey Mouse and the Batman Beyond Rebirth, and everybody should read my review.
I really enjoyed the Batman Beyond one. I also enjoyed that comic.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Tim Drake as Batman Beyond. So I wouldn't mind seeing that come to a DC animated film at some point.
Although, have you read it yet?
I haven't read the news. I was on it. It was in my recurring pull list for a while.
Okay, I won't say anything then.
Right.
The Rebirth and number one were both pretty good.
Okay, nice, good.
I enjoyed them.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining.
Before we go, though,
okay, yep.
I want to get one more thing in, and this is for our buddy John. Star Wars Rebels. I know John and I are both rabid fans. If you like Star Wars, you should watch it. It's actually really well done. It's marketed kind of towards kids, but I honestly think if they made the prequels as good as they did Star Wars Rebels, as far as that balance of politics, action, and all that, I think things would have been there would have been different tunes being sung. So I really can't say enough good about that show.
Cool, good plug.
Cool.
Plug. All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for joining in. I have been Agasically Stamus, one of your co-hosts here with my other two co-hosts, Mr. Dave Pecci and Mr. Peter Morrow. We'll be doing the show weekly, and I guess we'll figure it out. So there was no intention of tonight being a deep dive on console generation history and sales numbers, but I was fine that it went in that vector, and maybe we'll do something to perpetuate that from here on out. We will see how it goes. So thanks so much, everybody, for joining in to this premiere episode. This has been Geeks Worldwide with the GWW Weekly, and we are out of here.